Good morning, hello, and how are you? Here's my good friend Curley to say howdy too.
Good morning, boys and girls. I'm surely glad to see so many buckaroo buddies tuned in on TV.
Hey, we'll play some games, have some fun. What a happy place!
When Harlow gets a great big fat pie smack dab in the face. So hello, hello, hello. Come and join us for the Stooges Show. Good to be back with you, old buddy.
Oh, it's over. I'm sorry.
Good to be back with you.
Show.
The four characters that I portrayed were very interesting, and they were all kind of different. Horseshoe Hal was the first one. I'm walking down the hall, and the program director says, "How tall are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm about 6'2". And he said, "Did you know that Cactus Jack is leaving to go to another station?" I said, "No, I didn't." "You're 6'3". "I think you'll fit the outfit." So that was my audition. I fit the Horseshoe Hal outfit. I love that story because it was no credit to me that I got that thing. Of course, we ran out of Western movies almost immediately, and so there was no question. There must have been, wherever the Popeye cartoons played in the United States, there was always a captain. So big production meeting. "What will we call you? You're not Horseshoe Hal anymore." So on Friday afternoon, I sign off as Horseshoe Hal, and on Monday, I sign on as Captain Hal. The kids didn't miss a beat. They didn't think anything about it. So, kids, welcome to the Popeye Show. Now, Captain Hal was probably one of the most restrained characters. Youngstown, Ohio, where I happened to be at that stage of my TV career, had a wonderful park, like Riverside Park was to Indianapolis. And you could go out there and get into all kinds of trouble and fun. But see, here's the key to these things. This is 1954. This is early television, but the station was very good about spending whatever it takes. So they would send a camera crew out without even blinking. It was owned by a newspaper. And interestingly, around the United States, newspapers were not allowed to own TV stations. In fact, in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Star lost out on owning a TV station because they were a newspaper. So it was very different. Anyhow, they were just great about sending Captain Hal out. And one of my favorite memories that most kids would be able to relate to if they're in the baby boomer age group, our biggest guest that we ever had was Sky King. Well, don't you know, he comes out and tries to do a little gymnastics, broke his finger. Well, you'll be interested in my coming to Indianapolis from Youngstown. Indianapolis is my home. I grew up here, went to school here, and Tech High School did more for me, I think, than anything I can ever remember. But in Youngstown, I was doing nothing but television, a little disc jockey work, and I came to Indianapolis to do disc jockey work. And I thought, oh, what happened to Horseshoe Hal and to Captain Hal? Didn't they see that in my audition tape? Well, finally, they decided that when a vacation came along, I could come aboard just for the vacation. And that was it. That was to be just 2 weeks, and you've helped out. And people immediately seemed to like Harlow. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Harlow Hickenlooper and where we came up with that name and all. His character worked from 1960 to 1972, and boy, did I enjoy having the crazy fun we had. I was supposed to be the nephew of Hoosier Hank, and that's how I was originally introduced. The striped coat and the straw hat just came out of nowhere. He ran a general store, and they decided I would be a delivery boy, and I guess in earlier days having a straw hat wouldn't have been unusual. Now the striped coat, I don't think the delivery boy would have worn that, but they thought it played nicely in the setting. But what will we be called? Well, all of us started out in radio. I started out in 1951. Television for me didn't come along until 1953. And every time I would run across the name Senator Burke Hickenlooper of Iowa, Hickenlooper, are they kidding? Well, what do we call me? Harold is my real name. Hal is my chosen stage name. Well, we can't call you Harold Hickenlooper. So Jerry Vance, who was the producer of the program at that time, said, let's see, Harlow, hey, Harlow played. So I came up with a last name, and Jerry supplied that. Everybody in the production meeting approved of it, thought it was great, and we were off to the races from the 1960 to the 1972. There was almost an absence of 15 years before Grandpa Harlow came along. I want to tell you about Grandpa Harlow. He was probably my favorite character in the sense that the children I worked with were first grade, but mostly kindergarten down, and no reflection on the children who used to watch the Three Stooges, but the youngsters were so honest, they were so inquisitive, and so much fun to work with. Grandpa here in the clubhouse with a couple of our kids club friends. Adam Black, good morning, Adam. And this is Delia Vance. Hi. How do you like it here in the clubhouse? Pretty good? Hey, where's your Humpty Dumpty?
On my hair.
Well, are you having a good time in the clubhouse? Yeah? But Delia's just a little bit funny about Taffy. She's not so sure about Taffy, is she? Thank you, kids. We got to go back to our children's programs. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, children. I have to confess that I really like working with the younger children because they're so creative, and nobody realizes, I think, what wonderful actors they are. They enter into things with great enthusiasm. So I had done pledge drives for Channel 20 for probably 12 or 15 years, even when I was employed at Channel 6. So I was over at Channel 20 all the time. And at one point, the then president said, "You don't realize how much time I spent watching you when I was a kid." Well, I'm 15 years older now. I can't be Harlow anymore. And I think he said, "Well, you can be Grandpa." Well, now, he claims that I brought up the subject of being a grandpa. I claim that he brought it up. Anyhow, we have a lot of fun kidding about who did what as far as getting in there. But I would come in about once a month and we would videotape little segments. Now again, they had no idea when they would run, so we would make a 30-second segment, a 45, a 60. I think the longest we ever had between Sesame Street, Captain Kangaroo, Sherry Lewis, and those things was maybe 2.5 or so. So it was tough for me to have guests, but we would get somebody in from the symphony orchestra, a cellist or something like that, because Channel 20 was more educational. And I would bring all kinds of nicky-nacky things in from toy stores and things like that to share with the children. But we did that from 1990 to 1995, and then the family decided we were going to move to Florida. So that was the only thing that brought Grandpa Harlow to an ending, was that moving to Florida.
Got him.
I want to tell you a little bit about Curley Myers. We grew to have such a great relationship and friendship. You can't imagine, in all these stories you hear about show business of people not really caring but having to perform together or something. This man was an absolute delight, and I respected him so much because he was not only an instrumentalist, a fine guitar player, he was a wonderful singer, and he was a wonderful entertainer. Now, where we had fun in doing some of those sketches, he really didn't consider himself an actor. But you know, he put his best foot forward in those things, and he would end up doing a good job in something that he'd never had any training. Curley had actually been doing a Western theater thing back in 1957, in that era. The networks in the early years didn't supply. In the later years, they started taking away all of the local time. And poor Curley, you know, for Roy Rogers and some of those things, they needed at least an hour, maybe longer, to do the movie. The network kept closing in on him. When the networks took over his time periods, they suggested that he come and join me on the Three Stooges Show. A cowboy and this character with a straw hat, you know, would they really fit? I don't think it could have worked out better. We just seemed to complement each other very, very much. And it turned out to be a very happy relationship. Now again, wonderful instrumentalist, wonderful singer, wonderful MC, entertainer kind of thing. But when we got to the program a few years later with All Hands on Deck, and there was no music on that show. Every once in a while he would get out. But he basically had to depend on his acting. And so in one situation, he was playing a gorilla or something, and all he could say was "Oomba." So even now, when he signs off on the telephone conversations that we have almost weekly, he says, well, this is "Oomba." This is the way it used to be long, long ago.
ID, tape 1, part 1 of tonight's show. The All Hands AHOD show for today, the 7th, right there, 7th, number 2. Okay, this is tape for today, AHOD, 4:30, the only tape in the show today, Whiskers and Curly. Oh, yeah, this is an insert. This is the first insert for this evening's program. Walter, Gregory, and Dr. Fleabit. Walter! Walter! Sit down. Sit down, I said.
Oh, all right.
I'm not pointing a snub-nosed 45 at you for nothing, my boy. I would just soon pull this trigger and look at you.
You just better watch it.
Get him! Get him! Good boy! Good. I'll hold that boy. Go ahead, get him, Barry. Kill him! Kill him! Tickle, tickle. Tickle, tickle. Tickle, tickle. What do you think? Tickle. Get him, quick.
There's so much to the story of Larry Vincent or Jerry Vance, as he used in Indianapolis, but he had been a professional stage actor starting out in Boston, was even in a New York production, and his real love was legitimate acting. And I'm guessing that in just a few years in Indianapolis, he performed at our Indianapolis Civic Theater in 6 or 7, maybe more, in really heavy character roles, very serious kinds of thing. But Jerry was my first producer of the Three Stooges program, and very talented, and we were always trying to figure out a way that we could utilize his acting talent. I mean, he was a great producer, but never on camera. So years later, when All Hands on Deck came along, perfect casting. He looked like a seaman. He had this unusual, striking face.
His name is Mr. Eddie Seabody, so he's about ready to go on his number here.
Excuse me.
When Jerry got very serious about wanting to go to California and Hollywood, an attorney here in town started a group of attorneys and doctors, myself included, and we raised about $25,000 and said, Jerry, here's your bank account, we'll see you later. We really loved the guy and we really wanted him to be successful. He went to California, immediately did a bit part with Julie Andrews, got on some of the comedy shows, none whose names come to mind right now. Then he got a TV thing out there, Seymour, I believe it was. And so he had that income, but he hadn't been out there even a full 2 or 3 years, I don't think, when he was struck by cancer. And he went very fast. He had the abdominal kind, and the next thing we knew, and of course we're miles away and can't, get out to visit him or anything. But so Jerry's dream of being a Hollywood star, and I'm sure he would have been, didn't ever come to pass.
Where are you from? We never did establish
Well,
that.
I'm from the West, Mr. Director.
Western Texas.
No, Western Indiana, really.
Western Indiana.
Yeah, Western Indiana.
You did shows out there. You've done them 8 to 9 years.
Oh, yeah, lots
of course.
lots of them. Me and my 2 buddies, we've done all kinds of shows in every place.
You had a director out there.
Oh, yeah. We one of the best directors you ever heard tell of.
What was his name?
Well, his name was Charles Timothy O'Donnell. He was real well respected out in that part of the country.
Never heard of him. Never heard of him.
He's a real good director.
I need to be sure and include Chuck O'Donnell in any memories of the Three Stooges Show, because he would alternate directing and producing with Jerry Vance, the later Captain Star. And especially when Jerry became Captain Star, Chuck took over full time because Jerry was on camera as Captain Star.
Come with me, mateys, I'll tell you my tales. Show you the home of the black-bellied whales. Weather is good and there's wind in the sails. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho.
All right, clew up your mainsails and your mizzen and look lively there, mates. Boy, mate, welcome aboard. Captain Star speaking here. Nice of you to let me drop anchor at your place. And I'm welcoming you aboard, and maybe we can spend a little time together and swap a few yarns. Oh, like you to meet Davy Jones here. Old sidekick talking in my ear right now. What's that, Davy? Yeah, we're glad to have everybody.
And so it made for a very interesting thing. But the best way I can summarize his career, Chuck started out in the TV business as a floor manager, or somebody who stands behind the camera and tells you when to go and tells you when to stop and that kind of thing. By the time he left Channel 6, he was a Joe DiMaggio, he was a Ted Williams, he really could hit a home run. And he was one of the most devoted, unselfish people I ever knew. To make you realize the dedication he had, our early films were on 16 millimeter. There were no video cameras. There were no shoulder cameras. There were nothing. So now Chuck has to take that film, make sure it gets developed. Can't be in with the news department film. He's got to keep it separate and beg and borrow to get the film developed. Then he's got to spend hours editing it. And I have to tell you honestly, I know there were many hours that he never got paid for that.
We were just having such a good time doing what we were doing.
And that came through.
It was just fun. You know, hours didn't make any difference. When we left the home for work, it wasn't work. It was, we're going to, you know, hook up with our buddies and sit down and work up some nonsense for a show, and then go out and film it, and then do it, and it was not work.
He would do it out of a good heart, and for the success of this show, he would spend any amount of time at that editing table, and I would go down and I would say, Chuck, what on earth are you doing? And he's running it through these little gadgets and he's snipping it here, and then he's having to glue it, I guess you would say, together. Just would spend so much time in getting us to air. And if the film would break when we were showing it, you know, that just broke his heart, because he said, I've let you down. He said, that should have never happened. I had that spliced real good, and I had it this way and that way.
No, but we would do it all hands on deck. It was 4:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, and at 5 o'clock we would meet and have a little production meeting for about a half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah, we got more serious about that.
To decide what we're going to do the next day. I think we rode the storm scene and the weather to the end, because we were having so much fun on the ship. All hands. The setting was the Captain Star, bless his heart, he was such a creative mind. We all agree on that. He was just he was great fun. And
well, and a fine legitimate actor,
yes.
You know, had been in many straight dramas for years and years over at our local civic theater here.
Mm-hmm. And when we started off, it was we had little segments to put together, and we were allowed probably 4 minutes per half hour for a little segment, because we had cartoons to run in there. Sure. We had Diver Dan, and we had these other things. Well, actually, we got to the point where we were almost doing a full half hour of live and interspersing some commercials. I mean, we squeezed out poor Diver Dan, and we just made our own fun. So.
But do you know, later he was being sent to Scotland to do special shows with Jimmy Clark, the race driver. So again, I say he had come from Bat Boy right up to the pinnacle of his work. And Chuck later went on to be a cable TV salesman. He left the actual television directing and producing, but he had to be one of the very best. The networks, once in a while, got us a really big name. And the thing that I appreciated the most about them is they didn't come in and say, well, I'm not getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning to come in on your show. I need to pre-tape this thing. Sherry Lewis, William Shatner, all of these people were willing to get up and come in. I think that tells you they were pretty nice people.
Secret. I don't want Harlow to know.
don't know. The mystery is getting more mysterious all the time. If I just had a little bit more courage, or if I just had a little bit more idea what I ought to do, then I think I could... Good morning.
That's all right. You're Harlow.
And you're... Would you whiz? Good morning. Good morning, Sherry Lewis.
Good morning.
Oh, listen, well, sit down.
What is it?
Gee, if I'd known you were coming, I would have had on something a little bit more formal. Well, listen, you already know about Sherry's Saturday morning show, but it's those other shows now that we want you to take particular note of, and we'll remind you right up through November 25th.
That's very nice of you.
Not one of them will dare forget.
Thank you.
Okay, Sherry.
Good to see you. Goodbye. Bye.
Harlow, I think that's it. Right here, Captain.
At your service, sir.
No, not at my service. You're not at my service. You're at the service of the whole public. I'm Captain James Kirk.
We know that.
Otherwise known as William Shatner.
Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Three Stooges Show.
Thank you very much.
Just a big pleasure.
Good morning.
Boy, are the kids excited about
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Oh.
What have you got here? What is this?
You tell him, Harlow.
Well, you see, we admire the Enterprise so much that we were hoping to build a replica for you.
You like the way we take off with our big impulse engines and our warp drives? You like that?
Yeah.
Well, what have you got here?
Well, this was going to be kind of like a special welcome to Indianapolis.
But I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
It looks like a big balloon.
It was supposed to be our Enterprise or something near it, but Harlow goofed someplace.
Well, have you got a phaser? Because if you have a phaser pistol, a phaser pistol, the pistols we use on the show.
I got old Betsy here. Will this work?
Old Betsy?
Yeah, that's
you
old
call.
Betsy.
Well, it's a beautiful
my 38,
gun.
sure. I've had it long.
It's a beautiful, but that's no good. Well, of course, we don't use that. We use phasers. And the light comes out and they shoot, and people dissolve and things go away.
Oh, we know, because we see it every Friday night.
I'll get one from the ship. Give me a communicator.
Okay.
Have you got a communicator?
I don't. Harlow,
you don't have a...
No, we don't have one.
Does anybody have a communicator here? There aren't any phasers. There aren't any communicators?
No, we
well,
see.
fellas,
yeah.
Well, what can I do?
In space,
It's something like that. Out there in space, it's magic. The kids can watch in on Fridays at 8:30 and see the magic of space.
I don't know of any show that's had quite the impact, of just really taken off. That was a little trouble, Mr. Captain.
This thing was really, no one could ever get this thing off the ground, that's for sure, because he made this.
No, you don't understand. You see, I'm Captain Kirk, and I can make this thing get off the ground. Now, let me examine it a moment.
He made it here, and, with this hammer and...
Well, I understand that. But Harlow, let me give it a try.
Oh, we don't...
I can at least try it, can't I?
No phasers or anything like that in it, I don't think.
No, that's all right. Not only Captain Kirk, but Bill Shatner will
listen, well, let's talk about Bill Shatner just a moment. I understand you used to do different kind of acting roles like Shakespeare, and that's kind of my specialty.
Really?
Yeah, like, be it not that even before them to those that even to we are not them that were there.
I recall that, Harlow. That's from that play, What Now, My Friend, Is This Too Much?
Not really. Does he know something about Shakespeare, really?
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
Do you recall the play?
It was, no, I was just making that up.
I know.
Hey, well...
It sounded good, though.
You live in California.
I live in California. I'm visiting, actually, to tell the kids the truth, I'm visiting Indianapolis just to tell everybody that Star Trek is on a new night now, not Thursday nights anymore, but on Friday nights at 8:30. That's really why I'm here.
Exciting.
That's really why I came down to see you two and to tell your audience that very message. And I had another reason for coming.
What was that?
I wanted to help you with your balloon.
You mean
listen,
Harlow's...
You think... I hate to impose on you, but if you think you could give us a hand, boy, we'd sure appreciate it.
You mean you can make it, maybe...
I'm going to give it a try. I'll try some strange, exotic method, some way of getting this thing off the ground that nobody's ever thought of in this world.
Boy, you'll really be super
now,
if you get that job done.
Nobody's ever thought of getting a balloon up in this manner.
I don't know. Harlow, it's doing some good. It's going up. It's going up.
It's great.
It's going up.
Bye, Captain.
Goodbye!
Maybe I better back up here and help you just a little bit. Horseshoe Hal had a very short life. He only lasted 1953 and part of 54. Then Captain Hal with that Popeye show jumped in there. And I did that about 3 years. So of the 6 years I was in Youngstown, I was doing something with children for 5 of those 6 years. And what was so crazy is that I was doing an adult Hal's a Poppin' show, a disc jockey variety show in the afternoons. Now you're going to say, man, they must have loved you. You must have been really super fantastic. Let me explain. And this is something nobody remembers. The earliest days of TV, networks did not supply programming for the whole day. The reason I had that program is because NBC in this case was not supplying programs between 9 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock. Dave Garroway and the Today Show was on from 7 to 9. Then we went dark. There was no programming. So people starting out in the business in those days were so lucky because we got to do things simply because they needed to fill the time. And Hal's a Poppin' went on for about 3.5 years. We always did sketches and funny things and helped the local charities. And we had pancake eating contests. We had the Little Abner, Sadie Hawkins Day race. And if no one was ever in a Sadie Hawkins Day race, they really missed it. And again, the station spared no expense. Cameras out on the street, the main drag in Youngstown, Ohio, and we were off to the races with that. Let's talk a little bit about that red jacket that we used with Harlow during 1960 and 1972. There was no real reason for that, but it just seemed to fit the character very, very well. And if you look closely, the first one didn't actually fit me. It was a little bit short, and I was in those days about 6'2", but I think the sleeves, if you really examined it very close, didn't come up. So whether that came out of a costume shop somewhere and they just made good, I'm not sure. But surprisingly, because most of the time we were only once a week, they held up pretty well. So I would say of the red stripe, there were only 4 or 5 maybe at the most, and you would think there would be more. But in 1966, I think we made the switch to the other. I was then also working for an advertising agency, and they had what we called a dog and pony show. That is, we created a presentation to prospect for new clients and had them come in and see us do our stuff. Well, the setting was kind of a circus deal, and we were supposed to be vendors, and we had a popcorn carrier and a straw hat, so that worked out very nicely. Anyhow, that thing only lasted 1 or 2 nights, and what are we going to do? We had about 8 of those jackets, so I inherited all of the multi-striped jackets, and it worked out very nicely because by then color TV was so prevalent and so regular that it added quite a bit to the character. And surprisingly, out on the personal appearances, and that was a whole nother life, as you could well guess, I think everybody thought, well, that's a sharp outfit that fella has. The hats now, it's too hard to calculate. I would say sometimes on a personal appearance, I would finish off 3 in that one appearance. If I got a lot of pies, or if we had a knockabout stuff with a plastic baseball bat or something. They went pretty fast. And this lovely thing back here, can we see it at all? I got in Marion, Indiana in 1965. I had done that very thing. I had beat up a hat so badly that for a second show, I needed to go into town. So I went to the Goodwill store in Marion and said, would you? Why, sure, they had all kinds of straw hats. So I got this, and why it is still in one piece, I do not know. Would you look at that? Isn't that something? Why it is still here, I don't know. But it's a sentimental thing, as you could well guess, and I'll take it to a program. In fact, I have done a program just the week that we're recording this, and I only let them look. They can't touch. Yeah. But they get a kick out of seeing that it's still in one partial piece. The only other thing that I don't wear too much nowadays is a bow tie. And in my current appearances, I'll maybe show it to you later. I have a Three Stooges tie that I wear because of all those years with Harlow and the show. So that kind of covers the bases, I think, on the jacket and the hats. Now, I don't want you to think that I was the only one on television, or Curley, or Jerry. The other stations had an interesting array, and being an independent station, Channel 4 is thought of, even to this day, as almost exclusively being a children's show station, because they didn't have a network to fill up the time. They used local personalities and did a wonderful job. The first, here we go, Popeye host over there was not Janie. It was Captain Jim. And Captain Jim later became the sales manager at my Channel 6 station. Well, then who replaced him? No, it wasn't Janie. It was Happy Herb. Happy Herb later went on. Why he didn't get named Captain Herb, I don't know. That's for sure. He then became a very successful salesman at a TV station in Chicago. Over on Channel 8, Bob Warren did Nosy the Clown for a very uncertain time in my mind. And then there was a fellow named Don Abbott who didn't become a children's character. He just did a couple of children's shows, almost like a quiz show, if you will. One of the people that I feel was really outstanding was Bill Jackson at Channel 13. He used puppets, and he was not influenced by Sesame Street. He did his own thing and created his own puppets. Another category before Channel 20 ever came on were the kindergarten college type of programs. And Barbara Medlicott was one of the first here in town, and I think they called her Miss Barbara. There was a fellow named George Williford who did not a children's show, but a morning comedy show. And then another fellow named Don Melvoin came to town from Grand Rapids or someplace in Michigan. But he was more, again, like George, an adult entertainer, and would not have been in the children's show category. Oh, Sammy Terry. Oh, he was on 28 or 29 years. What a wonderful tribute to him. I think if his health had held up, he probably would be on to this very day, because he really did a good job. And he started out, maybe he did, I think he at one point did very briefly for Channel 4, a children's show. I think that pretty well covers the waterfront on some of our folks on the other channel. Well, we didn't talk about Janie. She, of course, followed Cowboy Bob. Cowboy Bob was a crewman on her show, and he worked behind the cameras, and she was nice enough to include him in a couple of things, Pretty soon he's coming on more often. Then pretty soon he's bringing his dog on. Then pretty soon he's bringing his horse on. And I guess they finally decided they better give him his own show. So that worked out very nicely. And the shame of it all is about the only time we saw these people was at the parades. We never got to see each other too much other times. But Janie and Bob and I occasionally do shows together and have a wonderful time. You know, people say, well, how did you come up with all of those ideas for different things? And the majority of them were just things I has enjoyed as a kid. I enjoyed kite flying. I enjoyed sledding. I enjoyed getting messed up with the sand. And there's one little story there where the kids are covering me up with sand and having a grand time. But I was lucky enough to grow up in Indianapolis near Brookside Park and Spades Park and a couple of other different places. And I really enjoyed being, the only thing that ever scared me was when the big kids would dump you. Now that's a term that kids today wouldn't even have any idea with, but they would get hold of your back runner and dump you as you were going down the hill on your sled. Go-kart racing. Now that's another thing that we did that I didn't get to do as a kid, obviously, but boy, I sure acted like one when I got a chance to do it at one of the local go-kart tracks. But isn't it kind of sad? Is it just me? Or I bet you even think about this sometimes, that those things were so simple and innocent and yet were so much fun. Everything is so automated. Everything is so high tech. We don't have the simple pleasures that we used to with some of those things. And Curley, being the father of 5 children, and my having children, we kind of borrowed, I'm sure, not only from our own growing up days, but from seeing our children grow up. Children's Museum, what a wonderful, exciting place. And every year, all of their decorations were different. So it gave us new material. And all we had to do, the tough job was for the cameraman, because the lighting was so terrible, because it was dark caves and caverns and kind of thing. So the cameraman had the difficult job, but we had the easy job of getting scared because it was something different and something new every year. So it wasn't as if we were repeating the same old, same old. We really legitimately had new things to have fun with. And it was, the other big problem was getting Curley and I in the same small quarters sometime. And I think Captain Starr might have been along, yes, he was, at least a couple of times. And then when the cameraman would try to get all 3 of us bunched together, it really became a physical problem. But it was easy fun, and personally, lots of fun for us at the Children's Museum.
How about a nice... About 15 minutes late, and I hope we can find it.
There it is right there, Captain. See, right down the way. I've been there before. I know. See, it's right down. And then they have all the rides. Boy, you really have a good time.
I hope Curley's still waiting for us.
Well, that's right. We're going to meet Curley, aren't we?
Where the heck is these guys at? I tell you, they're supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. I hope they're not in trouble. Hey, little boy, have you seen Harlow and Captain Starr? Huh? Well, one of them's about this high, one of them's got beady eyes.
Well, hey, look at, oh, here's that thing I told you about. Remember? You hit the hammer.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think I got the strength. You know, I kind of a bad arm. Remember?
You can do it. You can do it. Now, see, just take them out. Grasp it firmly in hand, and hit it right there. Yeah, help.
Yeah, I kind of.
Hold tight.
All right.
That's it. Got it.
Here we go. All right. Oh, put it right down.
Now up and. Right.
Well, let me get a better grip. I got to get a bit. See, got to hold it just right. Or you
watch this, kid.
I won't do. Oh!
All right. That's it. That's.
Oh! Ow!
Give me that.
Okay. I got the idea now. Pow! Well, it's my bad arm. You know, I kind of.
Give me
I
that.
was afraid this was going to happen.
Now, shoot. Now, look out. Oh, look at that.
Wow. Go on it. See, you showed me up something awful. Oh, boy. Well, I should have never tried. You go ahead. That's all right. I'll just rest. I got tired from running in the ghost ship.
Oh, that was
Up.
Look at that.
Up.
Really high.
Up.
Boy.
Down.
Fun. That's fun. Boy, that'd be fun, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go, Harlow. Want to?
Down. Around.
Look at all this shit.
Down. Around.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Come on, let's go. Come on, Harlow. That's not very high.
No, I'll just...
Hey, look up there. That's just for look at all the kids up there. A lot of fun. Come on. Come on. Just get in there. Hurry up. There, you know. Sit yourself down.
Move over.
Move over. You're too fat, Harlow. I feel just a little woozy.
Oh, there's the go.
Did you guys see the ghost ship?
I'd rather go back to...
Boy, that was all right.
I can't look.
It's all over. It's all over. Now we can get off. Boy, that was fun. That really was fun. It was good to get your feet on it.
I think he cranked it up on purpose because we were on it.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun, though, after all. Let's wave. Hello. There's lots of fun.
Hi, everybody.
What else can we go on?
Well, now, what makes you want to talk about pies in the face? Was I ever associated? Well, I guess I was. Well, that was an easy choice because the Three Stooges films employed pies on kind of a frequent basis, and that stuff that they were making the pies out of, had a oil in it, an oil base, and it cost a ton at the cleaners. So we moved from whipped cream to shaving cream, and that saved the day. The number of pies, well, I know Soupy Sales would argue with this, but I think I ought to be in the Guinness Book of Records. Does that tell him something? You know, it's interesting, between Halloween and Christmas, Curley and I, Captain Star didn't do many personal appearances, we were probably busy every weekend from that to Christmas. And I can't even speculate how many pies I used to get in that one time interval. So if you take the whole year and all the other personal appearances and the company picnics and the this and that, it was a bunch. It really was a bunch. Well, only one time did I have a problem. I had a young intern on summer program for one of the Indianapolis parks, and I was emceeing a talent show for the park department, and this young man got so excited, he let me have it with his full hand, and I come back to introduce the next guest, and everybody in the audience is, I knew it had to be me. I was the only one on stage, and here, within this white shaving cream is this little red stream coming down. But imagine all those thousands of pies, and only one time did I get a pop in the nose. That was the worst thing that ever happened to me.
This news just in. Well, I think you already know I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a magician, and I'm not a piano player either. But I always love to clown around with that type of thing. So what you're going to see now is my impression of Henry Mancini or Roger Williams. Well, you take your pick, your favorite pianist, and see if I don't do the job. When I was a little kid, way back, the most famous actress was a young girl named Shirley Temple. She had ringlets that wouldn't quit, and she really was very talented. She could sing, she could dance, she could do it all. So when I had the opportunity, this was my impression of how she did one of her most popular songs.
I want to introduce somebody that you all just love today. She's the cutest little girl. Her name is Miss Shirley Simple, singing on the good ship Lollipop. And here is Miss Shirley Simple.
On the good ship Lollipop, it's a sweet trip to a candy shop where bonbons play on the sunny beach of Peppermint Bay. Lemonade stand everywhere, cracker-jack band, belly air, and there you are, happy landing on a chocolate bar. Eat the sugar bowl, do the Tootsie Roll with the big bad double fruit cake. On the good ship Lollipop, it's a night trip. Into bed you hop and dream away. On the good ship Lollipop.
Well, again, I have you to thank. If you hadn't made the show so popular, I would have never gone to California to be in the motion picture The Outlaws Is Coming. They took the shows that had the highest ratings around the country because obviously they wanted you to come into our local theaters. So I was in the league with New York, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, biggest city in Texas, I can't think, San Francisco, Oakland, kind of thing. And it's all because you were so kind to us in those years to keep us up there in popularity. And being on that set, you can't even imagine. I don't know whether you've seen it yet, but there's a picture somewhere that shows me with my own chair, with my own name, Hal Fryar, on the back of that chair. Do you think that made me feel kind of special? It sure did. Well, I'm sure any of us would like to meet the Three Stooges. I had the pleasure of flying out, courtesy of Columbia Pictures, and everything was first class. The airline was first class, the hotel was first class, the set and the way we were treated was, and would you believe it? That when the plane sat down in California, the three people waiting on the tarmac to greet me, little old Harlow, that's right, Mo, Larry, and Curly Joe. They really made us feel special. Mo is the serious one. Larry is as frizzy and fuzzy as his hair. I mean, he was really a character. But he took time out several days to go to lunch with us. Now, Moe and Curly Joe would sit on the set and play Penny Annie. Well, they're in their 60s. I mean, they had to rest between takes in the movies. They were no kids at that point in time. But Larry, where are you going? Can I go with you? I mean, he was just that kind of guy. And then Moe had everybody out, cast, crew, grip, whatever, you know, position they might have held, out to his home. Now, they had some tough times. They maybe didn't make the most powerful money in the world, but you know that sign, the Hollywood Hills? That's where Moe's house was. A lovely place, because Moe was the businessman, and Moe took care of his money all those years, and he was such a delightful host. In fact, we featured, I never say this right, beefaloes, buffalo bison lows. Anyhow, in the movie, they were featured, and we are able to enjoy some of them. And Moe tried to come out and do the cooking on these grills, and you see the smoke rolling up in their eyes. Well, you'll take a look and see for yourself. Can you imagine 9 Three Stooges hosts all coming to the same place at the same time? We were trying to outdo each other from the very day.
Where's the sheriff?
Well, he went down to the post office to make a report to Boston. Why, what's up?
Honey, I hear Rance Roden has sent for his gunslingers to get Mr. Cabot, and that's 9 of the meanest, orneriest galoos who ever cheated the gallows, and every one a dead shot.
Teach you to interrupt when I'm swooning the gals.
The first day on the set, I'm acting like Harlow. I'm doing crazy. The director says, cut, stop, hold it where you are. You're not comedians. You're serious outlaws. You're the outlaws. You're mean. You're bad. You're ornery. And you got to be that way. We didn't realize. We thought we went out there to be comedians, which most of them were back. So all the rest of the time we're kind of a hangdog, you know, and can't we do this? And off this camera, everybody's trying to outdo the other guy with something funny. The guy from Detroit is the one who replaced Soupy Sales. So he was into pies and other stuff. So he was ready to jump. And he insisted that he was one of the fast draw artists in the world, and that Sammy Davis Jr. had personally taught him how to be a fast draw. So when we got to this scene where we have a few lines, I was so uptight and so anxious to do a good job that I ended up doing a blooper. And the guy from Detroit is the one who falls on the floor. He said, after it was all over, he said, you did that on purpose, didn't you? You did that deliberately. And honest Injun, as I sit here as honest Harlow Hickenlooper, it was a real, for sure, blooper. I forgot what I was supposed to say.
560.
Okay. All right, action. Believe me, fellas, if you take the straight and narrow, kids all over the world will look up to you.
Yeah, when we get back to Boston, we'll print picture books about you, and songs and stories.
Your names will live forever. You may even get into TV.
TV?
Yeah, transformed varmints. Anonymous.
I'm sold. Right now, Trevor Road up and bald now selling guns and ammunition to the Indians. Right, they're going to try to start at daybreak by morning. Right, they're going to try to start at daybreak by morning.
And so, with the picture finished, the gunslingers rush off to catch an American Airlines plane for home.
Well, you better look out if you want me to talk about Christmas, because I could really rattle on for far too long that you never want to know. But to give you an instance, in my family, the only time my sister and I had a problem is I would not let her open her Christmas presents until after we had breakfast. Now, wait a minute. The scene is everybody rushing into the room with the tree and the presents, or coming down the stairs. Immediately, slam, bang. No way. I put the brakes on, and she couldn't stand me for that. And how I love to go downtown and see the Christmas windows. You know, it didn't make any difference of how big your Christmas was at home. Our city had so many wonderful stores and so many wonderful windows that you could soak it up and find out. And as it turns out, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, L.S. Ayres was only one of those stores, but everything that ever happened to me, they started. I did my first radio program from the 8th floor auditorium at L.S. Ayres. I was the Easter Bunny at L.S. Ayres, and that's a wild story in itself. So I took particular note of their windows, and I so wish we could go back to those kinds of times. Anytime I got together with the kids in Santa Claus, you know, and it's interesting how you make things work. Many of the shopping malls would say, "Oh, I don't need you fellas anymore. We just use Santa Claus in the mall." But I said, this is the creative talent going to work here. But I said, what are you going to do while those children are waiting in line to see Santa Claus? I said, we can entertain them. So this continued to let us have things around that. But no, Santa was such a wonderful figure, and I was such a Christmas person in Hal Fryar's life that it was easy to want to do as many different situations as we could with Santa. So we spent a good bit of time around the Christmas visiting Santa Claus, that's for sure. How could I forget Christmas trees? I know it happens in many families. I wasn't the only one. But my mom and sister were frozen by the time I got finished picking out a tree. And then later, as a father, the kids would say, "Come on, it's too cold to be standing out here." All of them, they were willing to take any of them, but mine had to be perfect. It had to have the top, the 4 branches, then the next number of branches. Had to be, and then I was so unmechanical. The later skit we did about a car and which end do you put it in, I to this day can't fix a flat tire. And so for me to know which end to put a Christmas tree in, I think it was some car, you know, that had the motor in the wrong end or something like that. And so the fun was in my actual lack of knowledge of what I should do there. But trees, again, were a wonderful part of Christmas. Encouragement to go out and be a part of something that was very important to the community, or visiting a hospital, or visiting the Indiana Sailors and Soldiers home, kids. These children had very special needs, and although you never really knew how you might have filled in a void or made that child happy for one of the first times in a long time. It was a great platform to be on, and give full credit to the stations because they made you available many times to go out to do those kind of things, whether it was for a telethon, whether it was for some special fundraising situation. It again was made possible by the fact that you were a part of a very wonderful organization, a radio or a TV station. Well, it was such a natural thing to recognize birthdays on the Three Stooges program that we got to a point where I felt that we had a nice opening song that, while there was nothing wrong with a traditional birthday song, we ought to have our own. Don't ask me where the melody came from. I used to get my hair cut where an Indianapolis Symphony concertmaster got his hair cut, and I hummed that thing to him one time, dum, 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 da, dum. He said, and he was Italian, he said, "Hal, I honestly think that's an Italian folk song." I said, "I'm not Italian. Where would I come up with that?" Well, he said, "I don't know, but that's the closest thing I can mention." Well, we used that on the show for years and years. We still sing it. But nowadays, since we don't physically go out to the birthday parties and become a part of that, we do it mostly by telephone. And I could take the records, and I called Denver recently. I've got a real good friend who's going away on vacation, and I'm going to call his home when he's not there and have his wife take it off, and I will leave the happy birthday song for him when he comes home to pick it up. But the number of emails that I get saying, "Do you still sing it?" And they want to know too, where did it ever come from, you know. So it was interesting in that respect. But birthday parties, we went to a lot of those, but I think I should mention at the same time that Indiana had a lot of big motor industries, GM, Chrysler, and we would go to their company picnics. Picnics, did I say? And so we had, well, in fact, it's interesting. Curley at one time went to the same company Christmas party 22 or 23 years in a row. Now, does that tell you what kind of entertainer he was? And he would always bring along a lot of other talent to fill out the show. But the same thing was true of going to certain lodges, fraternal orders, different lodges, American Legion posts, those kinds of things, to do family parties. And you know, that word hadn't come up, but that really is the key to the whole thing, that we wanted the kids to, oh, this sounds kind of dumb, but I mean, truthfully, they've been in school all week. If on Saturday morning we can brighten up their day a little bit and get them to relax, that was really what the important thing was. I hadn't even thought about it for quite a few years, but on both personal appearances and at birthday parties, I started doing comedy magic. Now, I wasn't a magician. I didn't even pretend to be, but I had always enjoyed Ballantine, who was a fellow who appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. And Ballantine would come out and do 15 tricks, and none of them worked. So I figured, wait a minute, that kind of fits Harlow's character. It was so in keeping with Harlow that the kids just reveled in it. And then, you know, in those days, it wasn't a fancy birthday party out at a restaurant or some place where big bucks got involved. Families stayed at home. They had the birthday cake. They had the streamers. They had the balloons. And everybody had a fantastic time, whether Harlow was there or not. And I think even those days, though, A lot of people didn't invite me because they were afraid it would be some fantastic, humongous fee. And believe me, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, any fees that might have been involved were very, very minimal. And the temptation was to try to go out, if it wasn't in Kokomo or someplace, and just show up. And we tried to do that whenever we could.
Happy, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to all.
Oh, here comes the pie!
Of you, happy birthday to you.
You'd think that I would be introducing and performing for baby boomers, but they all still have to make a living. They still all have a job. So I find myself going to retirement homes, to nursing homes, to churches where seniors are meeting for their once-a-month luncheons. And it's amazing that I'm entertaining the parents of the baby boomers, going to high school reunions for classes that don't really know for sure who Harlow is, but as long as he's funny, well, what can I do? I don't want to do the pies in the face too much. I can't do some of the clowning that I did, so I go back to my roots, which was jokes and stories as a nightclub entertainer. And it all comes back. In fact, I even still tell some of the jokes I told 50 years ago. Now, Milton Berle did it, and Henny Youngman did it, and many of the other top comedians were telling the same stories because there was no television, and they were going to different cities, so they had a different audience all of the time, and it wasn't a question of repeating themselves. And yet, you old-timers who are watching know that people would yell out, "Tell the joke about Aunt Susie." And so they did remember when they came back to town again. But Sid Caesar would have to have been one of my favorite entertainers, but I never got to do dialects. And Sid Caesar and Carl Reiner and those fellas all could do every imaginable Italian, German, Jewish dialect, and I had always wanted to learn to do something. So I was really impressed with many of those comedians who, Danny Thomas was another one in that category, who was able to utilize the stories about the folks coming over on the boat kind of thing. But those are some of my other memories. Well, I appreciate you're not asking me about my age, but at my present age, I don't remember certain things too well. And I enjoyed so many shows and so many entertainers that to rattle them off, you don't have enough time. But you know, I think the common denominator, the single thread, were ensemble shows. Jack Benny, Fred Allen, all of those people had ensemble shows in the sense that they had, and you must respect them for this, they weren't the whole show. They didn't mind turning over to Dennis Day or the band leader or Mel Blanc, who did 1,000 voices on Jack Benny's program. And later, you know, Benny went to television. So that continued to be one of my favorite shows. And we talked about Sid Caesar once. He spread the talent among the young ladies that played opposite, like Emma Jean Coco, and he had the Carl Reiners and the Howard Morrises. None of these folks, when you look at Danny Thomas, he was the same way. He shared the stage. Carol Burnett has to be one of the best examples of it's not me, it's all of these other wonderful entertainers that are on the show. The Conways, and I was so sad with the loss of Harvey Korman. I mean, these people, Carol Burnett could have walked out and let them do the whole thing. And she was just that generous with wanting to share. So that would be the clue. But this was true even of, there was a police show where they had about 6 detectives. And it's again because it was not one guy, it was an ensemble show. And that stayed very popular for many years in recent times. So that would kind of categorize some of those things. And Milton Berle, coming out of any of that slapstick era, they were the same way. They had a jillion guests and made sure that they weren't the whole show. Hey, you know, there's a good chance that you and I'll never meet each other, but let me tell you how special it is when I do meet a baby boomer. It gives me the chance to thank them for supporting us. The ratings, see, is what we live by. And here you kept us on for 12 years. And without you, there is no show. So we really appreciate your being in the audience. We really appreciate the cards and letters that you sent in. And don't ever be afraid in a restaurant or at a shopping mall coming up and saying, aren't you, or didn't you used to be? That's the greatest line, you know. Didn't you used to be so-and-so? Because we're so pleased with the opportunity of saying thank you. The other thing, we probably sing happy birthday over the phone to families at least 52 weeks out of the year, one time. They may be in Denver, they may be in Muncie, Indiana, but don't be afraid to drop my website or my email address a note and saying, hey, my brother's, my sister's, my cousin's birthday is coming up so-and-so time. The only thing, again, you have to remember, I'm 81, and you need to call to remind me that this is the day to sing happy birthday. I wish I could name all of the people who are presently in the Indiana Broadcasters Pioneers Hall of Fame. The obvious names like Tom Carnegie and Jim Gerard and Bill Crawford. Now, Bill Crawford was the very first weatherman in the city of Indianapolis, a pretty distinguished guy. Not only did he know his weather from his Air Force days, but he was a dentist in professional life. Anyhow, to be elected to a Hall of Fame with such luminaries, and that's a fancy word, I think that's the first time I've ever used that. No, but Sid Collins, you know, he did the race for what seems like 100 years. So I'm really proud for many reasons, because I started entertaining when I was 19 and continued through broadcasting for 30 or 40 years. But I think one of the areas that I'm proudest of, I think I am the first. Now, this was not all Harlow. I was chosen for a lot of things that I did as Hal Fryar, the Easy Money Show, and things that I did in Youngstown, Ohio. So it's not just the children's shows, but in Indiana at least, I think I am the first children's show host to be included. Now, there may be somebody from Evansville or Fort Wayne or South Bend that I'm not familiar with that are in that category, but for all of us, the Cowboy Bobs, the Janies, the Captains, the like, I'm very pleased that I can represent them.
Hal Fryar's had a memorable and happy 64 years entertaining adults, children, and now baby boomers and seniors. His first publicity photo was taken in a dime store photo booth. But he was always making faces, and look at some of the baby boomers. He's still making birthdays happy and appearing at school reunions, fundraisers, parades, and festivals. Hal is currently appearing every week as an interpreter at the Indiana Historical Society as a grandpa. It all started with high school variety shows, the lead in the senior play, and entertainment programs based on the national radio program Breakfast in Hollywood. A real radio program came next. A teen sub-W program, 1945, sponsored by Ellis Ayers on local WIRE radio, with a live music group. After a short stint in the Navy, Hal became a professional comedy singing MC and was booked around central Indiana and Illinois. Let's take our show on the road to Youngstown, Ohio, and our hero becomes host of a variety show called Hal's a Poppin'. The show ran 5 days a week for several years and even had holiday celebrations and, of course, pretty girls. And now may we introduce Horseshoe Hal and his first children's show with Western movies. And then almost overnight, Horseshoe Hal became Captain Hal with national guests such as Sky King and Always Children and the Popeye cartoons. Our Pied Piper marches off to Indianapolis, becomes Harlow Hickenlooper, and is always entertaining children, and not just on Saturday morning. Wherever Harlow went, children were there. A Monument Circle movie premiere. On the Circle with Captain and Curley, and at autograph time. Harlow gets in and out of a lot of trouble. Yes, he's just an overgrown kid. And let's not forget another afternoon show, All Hands on Deck. So long, everybody. Harlow dominated the image of Hal Fryar and made it necessary for Hal to turn to character commercials such as Alexander Graham Bell, the Back to the Future scientist, an Iceman, Charlie Chan, Keystone Cop, a circus ringmaster, colonial officer, super salesman, the story lady, motivational speaker, a comedy waiter, and comedy speaker, even Dr. Fryar the scientist. And now we must remember Johnny Ringo in the Three Stooges movie, The Outlaws Is Coming, filmed in 1964. All good things must come to an end. And what a wonderful ending at Channel 20 as Grandpa Harlow with a PBS morning program such as Mr. Rogers, Captain Kangaroo, Sherry Lewis, and many others. And special events like Let's Meet on Sesame Street, even educational opportunities in the classroom, and heartwarming reunions with old friends like Curly Myers. So it's goodbye to Harlow, his friend Curly, his children, his boomers, and friends Janie and Cowboy Bob. Did Hal have fun? You bet he did. Thanks, everyone.
Well, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce to you multiple number of personalities, all in one, Hal Fryar. Thank you. Thank you. I tell you, Paul and I started out carrying papers together. We haven't done any better. And Paul turned me on to the Civic Theater, and I was able to get several nice roles in the Junior Civic. I appreciate him very much. Folks, thanks to the selection committee, thanks to Dream Vision. Didn't they do a nice job of putting that together? It's been a wonderful, wonderful life, and we're not going to talk about me, we're going to talk about all the people who made it possible. Would you be surprised if I started talking about Mom? Short story, 1930, Father deserts family. I'm 3, my sister 1. Thousands of men all over the country are out of work. Women are not in the workplace. I am 3. My sister is 1. What's my mom gonna do? She went out, she got a job. She worked for that company for 37 years. At night, she would work all day at the insurance company. At night, she would go down to Robert Hall Close and do their payroll. She sacrificed. It's a heroic, wonderful story. She was a great mom. She's been gone 30 years. But let's thank Grandma Doe, huh? I tell you, even when I had the GI Bill to start me through school, she'd say, well, don't you need a couple of dollars for something? A delightful lady, and her grandchildren over there have that same work ethic. Amber Craney, Michael Craney, and the daughter Pam, the mother of those kids. And I've got to say, my wife, our anniversary is just a couple of days away, and she said, if you didn't step on it, I'm going early to watch that debate. Tech High School. Every one of the teachers I wanted here tonight has passed away. Ladies and gentlemen, I would have had 10 tech teachers here. Now, in retrospect, and maybe hindsight, maybe they were surrogate parents, I don't know. J. Russell Paxton, choir director. He went on to the University of Wisconsin, direct all choral work for almost 30 years. Ressie Fix, her son was Jay Stewart, who was on Let's Make a Deal, the audience guy who went around with a tray and all that. Everything at Tech put me directly into radio. Ron Jackson, because those teachers could not be here tonight, would you stand up? Ron Jackson is the head of the Tech alumni. He has been the president. He has been the president, the vice president, the treasurer, and director for over 15 years. And I'm very serious. He has given Tech thousands of dollars. He has given Tech countless hours trying to retain the spirit, the traditions, and the values that we had in the 40s and the 50s and 60s. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to do something about our public schools to help in any way we can to get back to that kind of culture. It's just so sad. Ron, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Dave Smith, one of our former presidents, is Tech. Every Tech guy stand up. I know Ross Cowgill is here, Paul Rakes is here. Bob Smith, you're also a Tech guy. And they would verify everything that I have said. Don O'Donnell, my first director of the Stooges was Chuck O'Donnell. He's passed away. He worked countless hours. You gotta remember, in the 60s, we had no videotape. He had to go out with 16mm cameras, spend hours editing, putting the little sketches together and that kind of. Donna, are you standing up? His widow, Donna O'Donnell, please. It was such a sad thing. I moved back from Florida, and the first thing I was going to do is play golf with Chuck. And don't you know he passed away just a couple of months before we got back. Channel 20, Lloyd, Alan, Janelle. Hey, we were the first PBS station to have Barney. Huh? That's right. We were big time. Now listen, Sesame Street Live, I love those preschoolers. Now there was nothing wrong with the Three Stooges kids, but they were too much into the pies. The preschoolers were just nice, innocent kids. Channel 6, where are you? Thanks to all the Channel 6 guys, because obviously you made an awful lot happen, and we appreciated it so very much. I tell you what, I've got to, you won't believe this, but we have a gentleman who came from Redondo Beach, California. He called me on the phone. He says, Hal, I wouldn't miss it for anything. I said, you're really flying in? for my thing, well, yes, he said, I wanted to be sure and see you, but on Friday I'm seeing Sammy Terry. And what, listen, Chuck, he wanted to have a pie fight. And you, Chuck Marlowe, and Sam Zimmermaker were going to do the play-by-play. And I said, don't you know Lee Giles said this is a formal occasion. Ken Beckley said this, that we can't get into that pie throwing stuff. That's passé. So we can't do it all. Well, anyhow, Denny, stand up. All the way from Redondo Beach. The author of a wonderful book on Eddie Sachs, Mike Redmond. Mike has written so many wonderful stories about me over the years, 30 years in journalism, and we're bosom buddies now down at the Indiana Historical Museum. So come down and see us, okay? Very good. Let me just quickly check to make sure I do. Steve Pyatt. Steve Pyatt, stand up. He's made an hour documentary of all the Harlow films, and we'll have it finished in another year. I don't know. And where is Lou Garrett? Lou, where is Mr. Byron? Mr. Byron, I want to take him to court. He has been singing my happy birthday song for 40 years. Now, all I wanted was $2,000 a year to give him song lessons. But, you know, he said, well, Hal, I don't think I really need that, do I? And just a couple of weeks ago, he sang my birthday song again to his 4-month-old or 4-year-old grandson. Mr. Byron, I have offered cease and desist orders continually. I want to put a stop to this man. I forgot IU. After Tech, I went to IU. They gave me the skills and the maturity. And back to Mom just a second. She wanted me to be a pharmacist. And I'm coming from Youngstown, Ohio. I've been Horseshoe Hal, I've been Captain Hal. I said, Mom, I'm coming back home to town. I'm going to be on the best station, Channel 6. And Mom, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be on the Three Stooges Show. There's absolute silence at the other end, I tell you. Well, listen. I got a email from my son who lives in Jacksonville. He said, congratulations, Dad. I had an email that I left in my briefcase. You know, my website, by the way, is halfryar.com. But we get... Oh, wait a minute. Let's be serious, because Lee's about ready to get the hook to pull me off of here. No. Curley and I... where's Curley Myers? Curley, come up here just a second. You want to talk about a pioneer. He was almost his first job. He was at WLW with Doris Day. Curley, was she still using her given name? Or was she Doris Day yet? She was Doris Day. This is about his first job. Andy Williams with the Williams Brothers was on the staff of WLW. Here is a true pioneer. And folks, I would not be here tonight if it wasn't for the help of Curley Myers. Everyone. Good night, and thanks so much.
IU giving you the skills, yes. Maturity, I'm not sure. But we hope you never grow up, because how about that? Life and energy of Hal. Terrific.
Ladies and gentlemen, I say to you, that if the state of Indiana ever had goodwill ambassadors, these Gaither folks are the ones. They are a tremendous credit to our whole state.
The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Hey, well, this was very nice of you to spend some time with us. I hope you enjoyed reliving some of these crazy antics. I wish there was some way, well, I still hope I get a chance to thank you if you'll stop me somewhere, all of the guys in the crew, the cameraman, the engineers with the mics, with the lighting. We had a pretty big bunch that it took to put on that show. And the floor fellas. Now, do you think I can remember all of their names? No. But I remember all of the wonderful things they did to make the show better. They even wanted to make the pie throwing better. What can we do, they would say, to improve the pie throwing? And they would take responsibility for it. And then there was so many weekends that I was away from home doing personal appearances with Curley and Captain Starr. And so I always felt badly if I missed a baseball game or a soccer or some activity that the family was in. They were always very good. The group of people that I can never thank enough are my teachers at Tech and Indiana University. I learned so much. It wasn't just one individual. It was many, many talented, capable, dependable people who made it all possible, and I sincerely thank them for that. Hey, nice to see you. I'll see you a little later.
Quiet. Leave him alone. Quiet. Why, you numbskull.
Huh.